like you do a little too far away, don't I? Oh man, I can barely see that mouse. Okay, got the time. All right, today we begin with vaYiqra, chapter 14, verse 29. Now, for those of you who may not know, that's the book of Leviticus, as it's called in English. I don't understand it. What's wrong with calling it vaYiqra? I don't know. Anyway, so it says, the hanotar min hashemen asher al kaf hakohen yiten al rosh hamitaher lechaper alav lipnei Yahweh. Right? So to kind of recap where we left off, feels like it's been, mouse ain't, whoops. No, okay, there we go. The mouse stopped working all of a sudden. Where we left off with verse 28, it said the priest will place the oil that is in the palm, that's in his palm, on the tip of the right ear, and on the right thumb, and on the right big toe of the purified one, being very clear who's having touched by the oil, in the place of the asham. Is it the right word? Yeah, asham offering. Because remember, we've realized this is not a guilt offering. This is something called the asham offering. And I think I've gone through that, so I'm going to skip that for now. So we begin with 29, and one of the really big words we need to talk about it, because I think it's new to us in this chapter, or at least it's been a while since we talked about it, was the way it's written out in this verse is veha notav. It's literally and the remainder, and the leftover, and the overflow, the abundance, right? You get the idea, the rest of it, right? So what were we talking about? We were talking about the oil that was in the hand of the Kohen. Now he has taken his finger and he's touched the tip of the ear and the finger and the toe. And so now he's going to do something with what's left in his hand. Because it says, min hashemen, so take from the remainder from the oil, hashemen, the oil. Asher al kaf, that's the palm. So that's now al generally means on or upon, but we changed that in English to in, because technically, even though it's in the palm, it's on the palm, right? So the Hebrews of old didn't make that distinction. Now, whether they do that in modern Hebrew, I don't know. I don't do the modern. And so, if we could stick with the biblical, I do just fine. But the modern, I've never really mastered worth a hoot. I'd like to. One of these days, maybe I'll meet somebody who speaks modern Hebrew and I can figure out the differences. I know some of them. Some of it. I watched this movie on Netflix before they went and started having TV shows about little girls having sex. We shut down our account and haven't watched them since. But there was this show on there where they were speaking in Hebrew, and I felt like I was really kind of starting to get the hang of it. Some of it was bizarre the way these people spoke, but I was getting it, and then the Netflix pulled that stunt and I just shut it down. It's like, no, I'm not going to be a part of that. So anyway, the palm of the hand of the Kohen, and this is yiten, and that's to give. It's to cause to receive. And I haven't spoken about this in a while. We knew these people, and this man, he didn't trust the bank, so he'd get his paycheck and he would cash it. He kept all his money in this little, I think it was an old camera box, and he shows up, he invites us out to dinner one night, and he opens that box up and shows it to us and tells us he's going to give it to the ministry. We're still waiting on him to hand that. I mean, it's right there. I could reach out and take it right now if you're going to give it to me. He did not cause us to receive. But I'm sure in his mind he gave us something. Anyway, so this is the idea of someone's actually going to get something. Something's going to happen here. So it's yitan is he give. Al rosh. Okay, so I guess the other thing I should say about the word forgive is to place, right? So it's the idea of he would have taken that money and placed it in my hand. So in Hebrew, remember, in biblical Hebrew, it is what do I call that? A something language. Help me out here, Donna. Ancient, basic. The kind of language that Bible Hebrew is. I'm drawing a blank. It's rudimentary. What? It's rudimentary. It's not like the language that we speak today. It's not even like modern Hebrew. A lot of modern Hebrews don't realize that some of the words that they use, primitive. There's the word. That's the technical word for it. It's a primitive language. So they use few words for many things, where in our world, it's many words for few things. It's completely opposite. And modern Jews sometimes don't get that the words that we use today to mean certain things mean something completely different in the Bible. For instance, when Ruth, known as Ruth rather, in the Western world, was speaking with her mother-in-law, Naomi, in the English translations, they always say, your God will be my God and your people will be my people. Why? Because that's modern Judaism. That's modern Hebrew, I should say. That's not biblical Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew used that word in a different way, and the way that should be translated to be proper in English is, your God is my God and your people are my people. That's the way it's used in biblical Hebrew. Very different than modern. And most modern Jews don't even know there's a difference. So when they read the Bible in Hebrew, they feel that they've got this superior understanding over everybody else, not knowing that their understanding is just as wrong because their language has changed that much. And it's the same way in every language. Every language changes over time. And I have the examples I can remember to use in English are always very crude. But my stepdad used to ask his friends if he could suck a faggot, which meant, can I bum a cigarette off of you, is how we say it now. But that's what they called a cigarette, was a faggot back in his day, right? And so when I'm a teenager, I'm over there giggling in the corner because it has a different meaning for us teenagers than it did for the adults. And so the ideas, the words change their meaning. Used to, it was great to be gay, right? We have a gay old time, and that just meant you were having a good time. Well, that has a whole different meaning now. So I know those are crude, but those are the ones that we all know. Well, I don't know if you know about the faggot thing, but you see where I'm going with this. Words change their meanings in every language, not just in English. You can't even say the Hebrew alphabet without kids in the audience giggling, because one of the letters has a different meaning now. And if you speak Hebrew, you know what I'm talking about. And I don't need to talk about that any further. But anyway, so things change. And we have to realize that this is a primitive language. So if you're going to look for a word that means to place something somewhere, you're going to use the word give, because the giving is the idea of receiving. And to receive, something has to be placed, right? So this word, going to give upon Rosh, the head, that means he's going to place it on the head. But you're using the word forgive, right? So it's not that it's idiomatic. It's not that it's poetic. It's not that it's some big secret that can't be understood. It's just the difference in the way the language was spoken back then and the way the language is spoken today. the major difference between the Eastern primitive languages and the modern Western languages. Anyway, so then it says, Ha mitaher, the guy that was purified. And that's that word, if you recall, that means to shine, to bright, not, to be bright. And I like the idea of saying, well, you know how you wash a car at the car wash and it looks all shiny, you know? And we say that about people that are all nasty, dirty, and they go take a bath or a shower or whatever, and they come out all shiny, right? Even though technically they're probably not really shiny and they're probably not really bright, but that's just the way this comes from Judaism. I'm positive, because they're the only ones that use that word in that manner. So it's just another one of those things that the meaning comes from to shine, to be bright, and it's just to be purified, to be clean. You took a bath, you know. Doesn't have to be anything holy. Then it says le chaper, and that's for a covering or to cover. Le is usually with, well, two or four, you know, FOR or TO, those words in English. It's to cover over. It's a covering, to overspread with something. And that's essentially what's being said here, is you're going to take the rest of that oil and spread it over that top of this person's head. Because in this case, of course, it's going to be a man, but you're going to spread that oil and over the head. And I remember when the time finally came for my organization to send me out, that they did that to me. And that was, you know, they anointed my head with the oil, you know, poured it on my head and all that stuff. It was the most emotional moment, and one of the most emotional moments I've ever had in my life. It was overwhelming. It's truly one of those moments where you feel as if God is standing right there. You know, like you're fully aware of it. You know that God's always there, but it's those moments, if you know what I'm saying, where you really, truly feel it. It was an incredible thing, but it was that covering of oil so that I could be sent out to do my work in what we call in English the ministry. Uh, anyway, we have Allah upon. Okay, what do we? I must have missed a word here. Oh, wow! Looks like I missed a bunch. Okay, so he's going to pour it on the. Yeah, I missed like 3 words. Pour it on the head of the guy who's being purified for a covering, and then it says Allah, a covering upon him. It's a covering over him. Lipnei Yahweh. So before the faces of God. We could say in the presence of God. A lot of people do that. A lot of translators do that. But this is Lipnei. This is Pana. This is you're face to face with God. So this would be a powerful moment, like what I experienced in that moment. Anyway, so we have my translation then is, and the remainder of the oil that is in the palm of the Cohen, he will place on the head, making purification, or the head of the one being purified. You could say it either way. They're both right. And then for a covering over him in the presence of Yahweh, or before the faces of Yahweh. We have to be careful about saying before the faces of Yahweh because of what Trinitarian belief will do to something like that. I get it, but that's really what it said. You guys know things in plural when speaking of God, it's because he's a living God. That's the rule of grammar. Now we can compare this to verse 14, or chapter 14, verse 4 and 14, right? We can compare this to verse 14. And the priest will take from the blood of the Asham offering, and the priest will place it on the tip of the ear, on the right hand, and on the right hand, and on the right thumb of the right hand. Maybe it did. Maybe I messed up there. And on the right big toe of the purified person. So it's in one you get the old, in the other one you get maybe a little more detail because that's the way Hebrew works, Bible Hebrew. We can also compare it to verse 17. And from the remainder of the oil that is in the palm, the priest will place it on the tip of the ear of the person who is purified, on the right hand, and I guess it does say that, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe on his right foot, on the blood of the Asham offering. So, because remember, he did it with the blood first and then the oil second, but it's the exact same thing, right? And just because it says on the right hand and on the right thumb does not mean you put it on the hand and then you put it on the thumb. That, again, Hebrew of the Bible was written a little bit different than Hebrew of today, and certainly way different than English of today. So it does not mean that he's touched on the hand, then on the thumb. It just means that he was touched on the thumb. Okay, let's take a look at verse 30. It says, Ve'asa et ha-echad min ha-torim o min b'nei ha-yona me'asher tasig yado. Some of that should have struck a bell with some of you. Ve'asa. Asa, to lift up, to bear up, it's to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce, to manufacture. It's all of that kind of stuff. It's of the water, rose up from the ground, and it raised up the boat that Noah had built to save all the animals, right? It was of that idea of the lifting up, but that's the same thing of labor. Because why? Well, because if you build a house, or you're not raising it from the ground, and so you're lifting up a house, you're lifting up a barn, you're raising up a fence. So again, because a primitive language uses very few words to cover a lot of things, but in biblical Hebrew, well, it's not just biblical Hebrew. Almost everything out of Mesopotamia, 5,000 years ago, all the way into 3,500 years ago, it got lost at the time of Persia, but which is still in the same area. But at the captivity of Persia, it was at that same moment, the West, the Greeks were fighting the Romans, and Hellenization came in during that time. So right up until those two time periods clash into each other, and things began to change, because as the Western world and the Western way of thinking took over, the way of understanding the Bible was lost. I mean, largely lost by the Jewish world. So such that by the time you get into the first century, Jews are taking everything in the Bible literally, which the Bible was never written in that manner. The language had no concept of literal. It just didn't. And so to go in and read that book in a literal manner is what threw so many Jews off when the temple was destroyed. Because first off, they had a problem. The Jews of the time that the temple was standing, the second temple, as it's called, was standing, they had a problem with that being the true second temple, because the big giant rubies and other various stones were not in the gates, and the walls weren't made of the right material, and blah blah blah, yak yak yak, right? Because they were taking it very literal. Yet when it was destroyed, I should say, such that when it was destroyed, even the followers of Yeshua largely fell away, because, well, that second temple was supposed to be eternal, right? And you have the same argument going on in Yisrael today with the Hasidim there. Now, we're Hasidic, but we're not that kind of Hasidic, right? That kind of Hasidic is still very literal in their understanding. They still follow the sages of the Dark Ages, who were completely and utterly Hellenized, and they don't realize how much Christianity snuck its way into Judaism in the Dark Ages. Rashi stole most of what he taught from the church, literally stole it from the church, because He wasn't from Israel. He didn't speak the Hebrew language. You know what I'm saying? This is a guy from a different time and place. Yes, he was born into a Jewish family, but that didn't mean that he had any connection to the ancient Bible. In fact, that was the problem with the sages from the Dark Ages, Maimon, Nachman, on it goes, Rashi and everybody else. These are guys that had no connection to ancient Judaism, and so they made up a modern Judaism. And it messed a lot of things up. So the Hasidics of today, they have a problem with the whole idea of, well, some of them, maybe even most, have a problem with Israel even being a state right now. You know, they're up there enjoying their lives there, but they don't think it was of God because they felt like God was supposed to fight the war and blah, 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 because they take everything literal. And ancient Hebrew was not written in that manner. That's all I'm saying. So it has a way of really taking people off the track. Anyway, so asa is this idea to lift up is also the word for labor. Okay. So this is erechad means, and one from hatorim. So take one of the turtle doves, the torim. Take one of the turtle doves. Then we have the word o, which we usually think of as or, but this is, I guess, spelled differently. I didn't think to even look at that. I think it is. Will, desire, it's free will, it's choice. So it's indicating that these are pure turtle doves. They're not damaged in any way, if you will. They're not diseased in any way. The choice of the birds. It doesn't mean take the choice one as opposed to they both better be choice. Anyway, so that's the idea here. And it says from B'nai, and then it says Hayona, which is the word for dove, Me'asher, which is from which, Tasig. Now this is the word to take, to cause, to recede from a place, hence to remove. So you're removing these birds from this place, right? You're taking them. And then it says Yado in his hand. You're going to take it from wherever it was and put it in your hand. Again, I don't remember the last time I taught this, but in Hebrew, they do have many words that fundamentally mean the same thing. And one of the things that Bar Kokhba, I'm pretty sure, is the one who did this. Several of them have kind of followed this thinking, and I think Nachman was one of them as well, where every single word in the Hebrew Bible had its individual, powerful, hidden meanings. You know, no, it didn't. And so what happens here is, he didn't use the word lakach here. Well, kach, the root word. He didn't use that word here, and that's that word of a man taking a wife to pull, And so because of that, now we use the word tasig, and all of a sudden you have two completely different spiritual ideas because they didn't understand the ancient way of writing Hebrew, the grammar rules and the formation of the sentences. They didn't understand any of that. The information wasn't there for the sages to look at. They were far removed from ancient Israel. They were far removed from the place, the time, the history, the customs, the culture. They were completely removed from that. And basically all of them trying to re-establish what Judaism is. Jews are still doing that to this day, still trying to rewrite our covenant, still trying to reestablish what it means to be Jewish. Oh, man. But as I talked on our lesson on Kasuto, we realized that there were actually rules. And if you understand the way words are used, you understand the grammar rules, and you understand that what they're doing is using a different word that means the same thing for basically two reasons. One, it breaks up monotony. Didn't you learn that in school when you write a sentence? Don't use the same word twice. Where do you think we got that? We got that from Judaism. It's a carryover from Mesopotamia because the Jews stole it from them. But anyway, I digress. So this isn't some new bullet point. This isn't some new separated idea. No, it's just a different way of saying the same thing to break up monotony, and or if they use it in the same sentence. If they'd use the kach and tasig in the same sentence, then it would have been for emphasis. But it's not in the same sentence here, so it's just to break up the monotony within the chapter. Let's just call it. It's not the word paragraph. That's the word I was looking for. So anyway, there's it. Literally, they both basically mean the same thing, and both of they are very interchangeable words. So anyway, yado, so in his hand, take it in his hand. So my translation, and make the sacrifice. I had to add the sacrifice because that's what we're talking about, but it wasn't said. It didn't need to be said in this verse. There was no point in it. You're supposed to know what we're talking about because we started off talking about the sacrifice, then it goes into the detail, and so now we're back around to what began this thought because we're finishing up the thought now. Because this is the way we'll call it a paragraph because it's so many sentences in English. We had to break it all up. Now in Hebrew, that didn't work that way. They didn't have sentences and paragraphs. They had a thought and then another thought and then another thought. And that thought, you may have to write 3 pages to get one thought, but it's not supposed to be broken up into sentences. Think of it as a paragraph if it helps. Anyway, and make the sacrifice one of the 2 turtle doves or one of the 2 young pigeons. Remember, because he had the choice between the 2. Because it said children of the dove, so that means young pigeon. What does that mean? Well, it's idiomatic for a 1-year-old dove. Start to say chicken. I'm like, what? Anyway, from which he acquired. Okay, so let's go to the picture-in-picture. On the right, number 4 or 5, whatever it is, 4, I think. Big button 4. No, Donna.
You mean the computer?
On the black thing.
There?
Yes, but you're on the wrong one. Never mind. This will work. This is what I meant. Welcome to Edah Shalom. Anyway, bracket here. The sacrifice. To elucidate what the make is, because make. What are they talking about? Well, make the sacrifice. One from the, and then I add this 2, and see the letters are squiggly and all that, kind of lean. The word's not there. I've added it there to make the sentence make sense in English. We don't need that in Hebrew. We need it in English. One from the 2 turtle doves, or one from the 2 young doves. Because it says, and notice here that I have young doves is encased between the little eyes, these little things right here. That's to show that it's basically that it's idiomatic, because what the idiom is children the dove, literally in the dove. Well, that's not going to make any sense to somebody reading it doves, so that you know that that's right. So this is the literal words, as it were, that were spoken, but this is what they mean by it. From that which he acquired. So we have the same thing here. That which he to take hand he. Well, that is English. So I put acquired. That's what to acquire. From that which he acquired. So anyway, that's just so that you guys can see the way I translate this so that the reader gets the literal, but also gets the meaning. I just think that helps. At least I hope it does. Okay.